So my name is Jimmy Palmiotti. I am a comic book writer, editor, illustrator. I've written for TV. I've written for video games. I've written a bunch of video games. I've written films. I've self-published comics. I have a comic book company right now called Paper Films. Before that, I had Event Comics and with Joe Quesada, and I do Kickstarters on my products, on the books I do, and yeah, I'm a busy person. Over my career, I've won a bunch of, the most awards I've ever won were for inking. When I was inking, I would win like one a year. Wizard Awards, Eagle Awards. I won an Eisner for editing when I was doing Marvel Knights. And I don't think I ever won an award for writing. But that's something to shoot for. Yeah, I've never been the guy that, we got to give this guy an award for writing. So I never had any of that. But that's what I'm shooting for. That's my latest thing. So, you don't write to win awards. You write to entertain. So, but that's what I do. And every month I write an average of 1 to 2 comics a month. And I've been doing that for the past 30-something years. Well, I'm in Florida right now.
Oh, pardon me. Okay.
Yeah. No, I used to live in New York. So,
okay.
Yeah, no, it's been it's been interesting. I mean, I'm definitely not one to do panic mode for things, and I'm definitely an information junkie. So I've just been reading about it, and when I go shopping, wear the mask, clean my hands, doing everything that's recommended. It seems like everybody else is around here too. So it's been a buddy of mine's. He's runs the emergency room in the local hospital. And he says, because they pushed aside elective surgeries, they're making all the room for coronavirus people. And he says, and it's been busy, but not crazy. So that's good news. But I mean, Amanda and I usually, we're home all the time. We work from home. So, the things, of course, we do miss is interacting with everybody, but, we've been visiting Amanda's parents live nearby, and we each have we have dinner together, even though the tables are 8 feet separate from each other. And, as far as work, I mean, most of the companies have shut down unless you had something already going on. So I just finished up the Harley Quinn and Birds of Prey books, and Amanda's still working on them. So she has a couple more months worth of work, and I'm focusing on the Kickstarters and my own stuff. I have to look at it like a working vacation. How you been doing?
I've been doing okay. I'm just an indie comics guy, so I have never made much money at it, and so I have a day job.
Okay.
I teach guitar lessons at the local music shop, and
okay.
Luckily I've managed to get most of my students to come over to interacting like this, and so
sure.
I've lost about maybe 13% of my income, which I can't complain about at all.
Right.
So
right.
Hanging in there.
And the people with the lessons now have more time.
The parents are desperate to find their kids something to do, even if it's just that little half hour a week,
Right. So it must be great to, you can teach, look, you can sit around and lose your mind, or you can put the time to good use.
Yeah,
it's up to the personality, right? Because some people do have a panic mind. They do have they want to run out and be social, and the hell with the rules, and the sucky part about that is it endangers other people. But I think we got a couple more weeks, maybe a month more of this, and then they'll slowly figure it out. I mean, some states, opening up things. I won't be running to those places. I'm in no rush to get this, so I'll hang back as long as I can, until I can find out if I have it or I'm a carrier or something. Until then, I don't know, so I can't even put myself out there because I don't want to get anybody else sick,
I know that you and Amanda do a lot of conventions normally. How is that affecting you guys? I don't know, as a writer, it's probably different than as an artist as far as the income you can make at conventions.
Yeah, the income, we were committed to like 4 or 5 cons. The ones we're bummed out about are like, the ones overseas, like Barcelona. And, we had plans around those. Like we would do the show and then we'd stay for 2 more weeks, in Spain or something. So that kind of sucks. But the local cons, cons come and go. People can take a break. We've been cutting back on them every year because our workload's getting bigger all the time. So we've just been limiting it, but it is really, we do miss interacting with the fans. That's the best part. The last show we got to do was right before this, was C2E2. So it was one of our busiest shows in years. And we knew at that show, we were using the hand sanitizer, and we were like, this is going to be the last convention for a while. We knew that, so we had a good time, and, it's not a big part of our income, though. I will say it's a big part of our promotion. So we go out and promote. Not a big part of the income. We sell some stuff here and there, but we have an online store at paperfilms.com. So we sell a lot of stuff off the store, and the store's been extremely busy. Yeah. Because people want stuff to read. We've been filling boxes. People buy these mystery boxes. We just throw a million comics in boxes and send them out. So we've been doing that, but the con season, that'll start up again. It'll be different, maybe, right? The world, look, if they find a cure or some kind of, anything people can take beforehand, like the flu shot or something, then everything goes back eventually to normal. And then we have that in the back of our head, sort of like when we were in New York in 9/11. We're always kind of prepared a little bit for bad things. And I think next time people are going to be very, very prepared. Obviously, the toilet paper was a big issue, but you know what I mean. They'll be prepared for things. I live in Florida, so excuse me, and my neighbor drives his motorcycle up and down. He's a kid, but I live in Florida, so we always prepare for hurricanes. So we have all our supplies and cleaning stuff and everything. We, when everybody was out shopping, we already had boxes of stuff we keep in our house just in case a hurricane hits and we have to survive without electricity for a couple of weeks. So we have those supplies, but now I think the world is going to have these packs as well. So it is what it is, man. We roll with the punches. It's never boring.
Yeah. Have you experienced any nice stories that you might like to share of how fans have shown their support to you as artists?
Well, definitely. I mean, my Kickstarter got funded in a day and a half. Okay, so that means there's a lot of people at home wanting to get some comics and wanting to, I didn't want to do the Kickstarter at first because I thought, I don't want to ask people for money with all this stuff going on. And then like 4 or 5 people told me, no, you have to do your Kickstarter because people want something. They want product to read. Life isn't going to stop. They want the stuff they want. And a certain amount of people are working. And a certain amount of people are being paid to work, and they convinced me to do otherwise. But I think everybody, like my neighbors get together. So I have like a dead end street, and they get together and they put the chairs like 6 to 8 feet away from each other. And then we all go out and drink, and we tell stories and talk to each other until the sun's down, so we do that every couple of nights. And, people have been volunteering a lot of stuff. We did some charity stuff. Money went to some retailers. Everybody's, at least the people in my world around me, are very generous and very with their time and trying to help everybody. And there's kids on the block. So I had a movie night, and, the kids sat over there and we sat over here and we watched the movies, my neighbor's kids, I'm like you. I'm probably just on the internet looking. You're sitting in the pool. At least you got a pool you can fall into behind you, huh?
It's funny. We bought this house 2 years ago, and it didn't have a pool, and there were, rats in the attic and mice in the garage and dry rot everywhere and leaky roof. And we've slowly been going through repairing stuff, and we just refinanced right before all this hit. Right. And the refinance was so low on the interest rates.
Yeah,
it paid for this pool to refinance, and then it was ready like a month before this all hit. And so my kids are going crazy in this pool now. It is perfect timing.
Pool is better than TV for kids because the pool wears the kids out. TV just makes them fall asleep. Pool actually makes them exhausted.
Yeah.
They can play in it. Look, I remember when I was a kid, I'd be in the pool all day. You know, so that's great. That's great. You got that. We have a little bit of land behind the house, so no pool, but you know, if I want to get air, I can go out. And you know, again, it's not locked down. They're letting people go. You can walking paths. We have a lot of walking and running paths, but they close the beaches near me. You know, and they might open in a couple of weeks. You know, the problem with that is, you know, the first day everybody goes out. Second day it's less crowded. 2 weeks later it'll be less. It'll be back to normal. And again, we're near Clearwater Beach. That's a busy beach, but take out the tourists, and it's not such a busy beach. It's actually pretty mellow beach. So.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to show you. I picked this shirt out to wear for you.
Angel Heart, man. What a great shirt. Did you make that, or?
I found it online. Yeah, maybe a year ago you posted about how much you liked the movie Angel Heart, and it's one of my classic favorites. I grew up with parents who, you know, they didn't like violence and horror, and you know, right. I would just watch these flaccid comedies, and I went to college and saw this movie, and it just opened my eyes. And I commented on your post at the time that you know, with kids, I'll go to social events and they'll say, "Oh, what's your favorite movie?" And I'll say Angel Heart. "Oh, I haven't heard of that. What's it about?" And I start to describe it, and the look of horror on their face, you know. But then when I'm talking with comics creators and stuff, everybody knows it.
Well, it's, you know, it's one of those. It's a film noir horror, right? And it's one of those movies that you catch things the second and third time you watch it. There's always a reveal and a little more you're catching, and especially after the first time, right? Because then your brain's reset, you know. But it's also one of Alan Parker's better, moodier film. And the film creates a world and a mood that just hits you. Like, it's dark and it's sad, but there's some kind of justice in that world as well, you know. And it's quirky because it does things other movies don't take the time to do anymore. Like, movies are written now, they're written so tight, like everything has to be to the story beats. And this one takes its time and does weird things, like the scene in Coney Island where he's talking to the guy, and there's little nuanced scenes in that movie that says like it's a different language, you know, and that's why it's a great movie.
The nose guard, and then he's wearing it later on. Yeah.
Yeah, he's, you know, what do you do here all summer? He goes, "I bite the head off of rats and eat them." "What do you do in the winter?" He goes, "Same thing," you know. And that's like Coney Island. That's where I grew up, right there. So, of course, I'm connected with that. Also, Mickey Rourke, I happen to like Year of the Dragon is another great movie with him. People forget he did a run of these great movies when he was younger. And Body Heat, you know, he steals the movie almost. And, you know, Mickey Rourke now is bizarre. But back then, he was actually this really up-and-coming guy to watch. And then, you know, his personal life, what happens with a lot of these, when people get fame, their personal life, you know, destroys their famous life. So, but that's a great one. And it's got De Niro in it. And it's got Lisa Bonet in it, who's terrific in it. And a lot of great people in it, actually.
Yeah. As we're talking about it, I'm thinking about how, you know, you've done a lot of work in mainstream comics, but from the beginning, I always kind of thought of you as this kind of off the path, you know, in that kind of noir side of things. And I'm curious what, you know, growing up, what your influences are. I assume you've read a lot of crime books and, you know, seen a lot of old noir films.
Well, I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of noir films, but I read less crime stuff, but I've actually grew up around crime. So where I grew up in Brooklyn, we had on my block where I lived, we had a mobster and his family. And 2 doors away from me, I had what they call a button man, a guy who would take care of things. He was a big, big guy, you know, and he would break people's legs or shoot them or whatever he had to do. He was very nice to us. He would take the garbage pails in. He was very polite to my parents. And the people around the corner, they owned like a security business, but they were mob people.
Security.
Yeah. So So I grew up at a time, and this is 60s and early 70s. And if you know anything about the history of film in the early 70s in New York, crime is like a major thing in these things. And so I had a lot of real world stuff like that happening. We had neighbors disappear. I had my cousin himself. He was an alcoholic, and he gambled, and he borrowed money, and then one night he never showed up at home, and his own mother found him 3 days later, or 2 days later. They found his car, and in the backseat of his car, his throat was slashed. He was dead. So that was my cousin. And so I grew up with that, and it's funny because the thing I really enjoyed writing was a Western, Jonah Hex.
I was going to mention that too.
Yeah,
a lot of those crime guys, they fall into, crime and Western.
Yes. So the Western, I was able to move the backdrop to the Old West. And a lot of the stories we did in Jonah Hex are very much crime themed stories, but with a Western feel to them. Obviously the themes are still there, the revenge, the bad guys. And it's funny because I think we wrote 107 issues of that book, and it was about a bounty hunter, but I could swear only a couple of the actual books ever had him bounty hunting. It was always about Jonah being known as a bounty hunter, and then the world around them gets weird. And so that part of it makes its way into my work. And also the flip side of that, growing up in Brooklyn, it was, especially with brothers and friends, there was a lot of joy and funny stuff and crazy stuff and Coney Island and everything, which made its way into Power Girl and Harley Quinn and stuff like this. There's a lot of how I grew up in these books. It's not so obvious, but when you write, you tend to go towards familiar things. And so if you wrote when you do your work, there's got to be some of your life in it. Again, a lot of mine was very dark when I was younger because the area wasn't great. And, we grew up, I always tell Amanda this, I didn't know I was poor until around college, when I realized that I wanted to go to a special college, and my dad opened up the bank book and said, "This is all we have." And I was like, city college for me, and so a lot of that stuff, I didn't know until I was older how poor we were, which made me a great prepper, meaning we live in a house and we live very much in our means, Amanda and I, we're not extravagant people, but we also appreciate anything, like the fans. We appreciate the fans. We appreciate the companies hire us. We're very grounded that way. So my writing does have a sense of a grounded sense to it, and it has a sense of humor. Even my violence has a sense of humor, because a lot of these guys, when I grew up, they were bad guys, but they were funny and they were charming when they wanted to be charming, and they were interesting. And also, they had their own weird integrity to them, even though I wouldn't hang out with them, So you write about the world you're in, and it comes out in different ways. I mean, I could write a book. Amanda keeps not bothering me. She keeps reminding me I should write a book about my childhood. But part of me thinks they're still out there somewhere. If I start writing this, I'm like, I'll wind up, they'll wind up finding me in the alligator lake near my house. So I'll hang back on that for a while.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that what you were just saying really comes out in your social media about, I can just feel that appreciation exuding from all your posts. I really think it's great what you put out and share, and how you share it. It does. It makes you feel, to us fans,
right,
like you're a friend welcoming us to come with you.
Yeah, I don't, if I argue with somebody online, we do it very, with a lot of integrity, meaning I see things different than you. I could see how you see that, or I can't see how you see that, but I respect that that's your opinion. Somebody told me, all the anti-Trump people, and I always say, one of my neighbors is very much loves Trump, and I don't really love him because his message is unclear, right? He's an unclear deliverer of messages to me, meaning when he should be thanking people, he's talking about himself, and he does all these stuff these social cues. I'm not crazy about his social cues, but I would not hold it against somebody that they voted for him. That's their right to vote. We're in America. That's great. You do whatever you want. I know I'm not going to convince my neighbor to change their mind. They have to come to that decision themselves, and the same could be said. They could be thinking to me. I have to come to my decision myself. But I don't like to attack people online. And when I do get attacked once in a while, some people will write me just to poke me. They'll go, hey, your book sucks, or you're an asshole, or whatever they come at me with. And I'm like, I have it written on the wall. The only power people have over you is your reaction to them. So I don't react to them. I mute them, or I tell them have a nice day. I'm not going to engage. Why would I engage somebody like that when I could spend the time on somebody that actually I like, that wants to engage in a conversation? I'd rather give them my time. I think I've had one or two people where they came at me, and then I kind of I kind of mellowed out their anger, and then they actually were able to speak a little bit afterwards without feeling attacked. And but it takes some work and finesse, as you know. You have to finesse people, right? I'm in a business. I want people to buy the stuff I do. It's great that they like me. If they don't like me, that's okay too, because you can't like everybody. Like I said, it's just. But I am a public person, so I do have to watch what I say. Once I hit 50,000 followers, somebody reminded me, they're like, "You're officially an influencer," and I'm like, "What does that mean?" They're like, "Well, you could say something and it could have some fallout, or it could be a positive thing." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I got to be conscious of that." So if I point out something people don't agree with, they could not agree with me. That's okay. It's like anybody's feed. You can ignore it if you like to. That's why I'm not on Facebook, because Facebook's too involved, and Facebook has issues with keeping people's passwords and people's information. So I don't trust Facebook. Twitter's a quick, easy thing, and Instagram I like to put photos and art up. So that's what I use.
Yeah, nice. This kind of brings up, as I mentioned in my email, my documentary is about the struggles we face in the industry, and I hypothesize that regardless of what level you're at, there's still struggles that you have to face, and this is a great example of something when you get to your level where you're an influencer, right? This is something, with my 20 followers who are all personal friends, it doesn't come into my world being, but
not yet.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah. So I would like to step back a little to
sure.
You talked a little about how crime got into your comics. Let's talk about how you decided, hey, I want to do comics. Where did that come from?
So when I was younger, when I grew up, I had 3 brothers, 2 older, 1 younger, and we had comic books all over the house. This was late 60s, early 70s, 13 channels on the TV, no cable, no computers. The world was different, right? No cell phones, none of that. So comic books were always around my house. My uncle owned a barbershop on Flatbush Avenue, and he had comics and Playboys in his barbershop. Everybody waiting for the next haircut. So I always had comic books around, and I loved to read them. And I had a group of friends when I was like in 6th grade that read comics, and they would come over. We'd all go over each other's houses and swap out the comics. We read each other's comics. We'd put an initial on the back of the book, and then we'd swap it out. At the end of the day, we'd give them back. So we traded and read them because we didn't have much money, even though they were only 12 cents or 15 cents or a quarter. Still, the only money I was making as a kid was shoveling snow in the winter and delivering papers or cutting lawns. That was all my money growing up. So I loved comics, and I always would draw all the time. My dad would get this, so he would get reams of paper for us, right? And the paper would be, it would be in a box of 500 sheets, let's say, whatever it was, and they'd be white paper, and on the backside it would be somebody's logo or stationery. And my father used to buy the reams for next to no money, from a printer that would screw up a printing job. Like they put the wrong name or the wrong phone number, and my dad would get that paper so we could sketch on the other side of it. So we always had a ton of paper that always said like some weird company on the back of it or something, you know. And my dad was pretty clever because he probably only paid a dime for a ream of paper because the printer was like, this is no good, we got to throw it out. My dad would say, I'll take all the paper you got, you know. Once in a while he would cut it so we'd get a smaller sheets and stuff, I guess because it had too much stuff on it. And again, like I said, it wasn't until I was older I realized how poor I was when all my drawings were in bad stationery. So I always loved comics. And then when I was went to high school, I applied for the High School of Art and Design in New York, which was an art themed school where you pretty much took all the arts, but comic book illustration was one of the classes. So I took comic art there, and while I was in 11th and 12th grade, I got some ghosting jobs working with professionals, Chick Stone and Dave Simons and a whole bunch of guys. And when I got to 12th grade, I realized that comics aren't for me because everyone I'm working for is poor, like worse than me. And so I got out of comics and I went into advertising, the college. I took advertising. And then for the 80s, I pretty much worked in an ad agency that eventually I went from working there to becoming a partner. And it wasn't until around 89, 90, I ran into a friend of mine from high school, Mark Texera. And he was drawing Ghost Rider and The Punisher at the time. And I ran into him and he said, I could use some help on my books. Do you want to come up to Marvel at night and help me do the backgrounds? I'm like, sure. And that's how, once I started going up to Marvel, I started getting background work. And then I started getting inking work. The editors saw me there every night and said, hey, you work hard here. You want to do a book? And eventually I quit sold the advertising, got rid of the advertising job, and then went into comics full time. And then, you know, I met Joe Quesada. We did Event Comics. Eventually I did Marvel Knights. And then after Marvel Knights, I just started writing. I just put the inking down and went to editing and writing. And yeah, so that was my evolution into comics. But they've always been in my life. Even when I was doing advertising and I wasn't doing comics, I was buying comics. You know, I was going to the comic store every Wednesday like everybody else and picking up my books. I have comics all over the place. They just, you know, I could just pull up a comic book. They're all over my house. I love them. They're in my blood. And no matter what I do or whatever, I'll always do comic books because I love them so much. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Did you think, hey, I want to get into writing, or I would love to editing, or how did those fall into place for you?
Yeah, it's falling is a good thing because even the inking, I wasn't really looking to get into inking, but I started getting work. The writing, I didn't have confidence. I mean, we did Ash and we did Painkiller Jane back in the 90s. And, you know, people would review them and they were kind of kind. They would say these books suck, but they have a nice energy to them or whatever. But I never formally took any writing classes, you know. So I think around 2001, 2002, Wildstorm offered me and Justin Gray. We created The Resistance for them and 21 Down and the Twilight Experiment. We started doing creative books. And I said, let's just try it. You know, we did it the hard way, which was just, they kept giving us books nobody wanted to do, which was great. And, you know, Jonah Hex was one of them, right? Jonah Hex never sold well, but Dan DiDio actually just said, hey, look, you love this character. Let me see what you can do. And, you know, I did everything from learn how to ride a horse to go to a ranch. I did everything, research, you know, because, again, I'm a guy from Brooklyn. What do I know about the West, you know? So, yeah, so, I mean, it wasn't that I set out to do a lot of that stuff. I wanted to. A lot of it was just there's the opportunity to do it, and I grabbed the opportunity. There was look. At one point, I was writing commercials. I wrote these 2 commercials for Nike. They were for Hooptown. LeBron James and Vince Carter. I wrote their dialogue. I wrote this thing. Let me tell you something. I never even played basketball before. But I went in for the job and I convinced them that I can do this, and I got the job. And then I went home and panicked, and then did it. And maybe that's the New Yorker in me. I don't know. But I've always looked at things like as a challenge. Even the Kickstarters, they're a challenge. Is anybody going to buy this? Are they going to like this idea? Am I throwing my money out the window? It's the challenge stuff that I like. So it's why I don't stick with one genre too. I've nenever been the guy you want to write, let's say X-Men or something. I'm not that guy because I like a single character, number one. Plus, I like the weird stuff. We got Harley Quinn. Amanda and I got Harley Quinn. It was an out there character, and we read the books and said, how are we going to make this work for us? And we said, well, we got to take her out of Gotham. And Amanda's like, I'm going to change her costume. I don't like, let's get her. I want to get her away from the Joker because he's a bit of an ass, Like we just started changing it so we can write it. And, again, we got lucky that worked out that well. So.
Yeah. I wonder, in addition to you falling through, if just you being like we're talking about in social media, you have a good attitude, you're likable, and it sounds like you can really pitch and sell projects. And I'm wondering if anything in your upbringing, you can say, maybe that's because of this.
Well, it's funny because when my mom passed away, we found all these old doctor notes and everything. And I found out that I didn't talk till I was around 5, which I didn't know. I don't remember as a kid. And one of the doctor's notes says, well, when he has something to say, he'll talk. He's going to be fine. And I always remember that. I just think that when you're growing up in a place that's a little violent and a little, you tend to not only look out, use your peripheral vision, but you do that mentally as well. You're trying to think what other people are thinking. You're trying to second guess before something happens. And then when I went into advertising, all that was about was selling an idea, right? So we had a campaign. My clients were like Pepsi and Maybelline and, Malpaso's company, Clint Eastwood's company. And so I had to constantly go in front of a group of people and say, okay, here's the campaign we're thinking about. We're thinking about doing these visuals. And I had to make them excited and convince them that, of course, I'm the guy that's going to save their job. So that's part of the job. So as far as pitching something, the secret to pitching anything is really flushing out and believing your idea. You have to flesh out all of it in your head, the whole universe, the whole world, and then believing in it. Because if you don't, nobody else is going to buy it. When I remember I would pitch up to DC, I would say, I got this great idea, this thing, and we could sell it like this. And if we get this artist on it, think of how cool that'll be for you guys. So I'm thinking of every angle. Again, because I'm also a huge comic book consumer. I buy comics all the time. And my writing office is in a comic shop. So I see a wall of comics every day, so you're in a position, you said you're an indie guy, you have your voice, but you have to say, who wants to hear this voice? Right? And how can I make this more desirable visually to somebody to pick it up? And it's a simple question to ask yourself when you go to the comic store and look at the wall of books. Why do you gravitate towards certain covers where you go, oh, that's a great cover? Well, you have to slow that down a little bit and say, no, why is this a great cover? Why is it my eye went right to this? And this is something I'm attracted to. And that has everything to do with you figuring out your writing and figuring out, why do I want to tell this story? Sorry, that's thunder. I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the idea that I want to get across? Why do I think it's interesting enough that somebody else would be interested in listening to it or reading it, want to read it? It's a very key question, because a lot of people rush into things and they hope they're going to find the idea, but it takes a little time to sit down with something and say, why would I want to watch this? Why would I want to read this comic? Like, what is it about it? And I'll tell you, a lot of books fall apart when you ask that, because you realize, we all realize this. Sometimes you have a box full of comics and there's only like 3 or 4 you really like in it. And it's great if you can take out the 3 or 4 and say, why do I like these 3 or 4? They did something in the story that I reacted to, or the art is speaking to me, or this is the coolest thing ever I've seen in the comic, and look at this double paste, and the way that guy turned it all on that, so there's these little things that make your entertainment, your stories, where it hits you, right? My thing is, if you can slow it down and put down on paper, like, why do I like this Star Wars and not that Star Wars? And why do I like this guy as James Bond, but I don't like that guy? And again, why is this pizzeria better than that pizzeria? It's a basic human thing, but it has everything to do with how you address the consumer. So you can be the most indie guy in the world, but you come up with an idea that people look at it and go, oh, I want to get that. Like, that looks like I want the answer to that, or I want to know more about that idea. And that's what advertising is. See, advertising is, I have one chance to hook you on this product. So if I can't do it visually, I'm going to sell you, insurance commercials sell you a theme. Bum, 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 bum. You hear these things. It's all about selling, or you'll have a beer and the beer will look like the best beer in the world. And all of a sudden you're thirsty. You're watching that. Or there's food. When you're hungry, you see a great commercial. Like, I don't go to Red Lobster. I live near the ocean, but those commercials look amazing, So you have to think of your writing like that, and what your book like that. It's like, what is it that's going to make this really appealing to somebody? It can't be so in your head. You have to get, you can get the craziest idea out there if you have the right pitch. Because like I said, some of the weirdest movies, Angel Heart, we talked about Angel Heart. How do you pitch that, right? It's a very complicated story without ruining the story. It's about a guy who has to track down somebody that's very familiar to him, but he doesn't know it, So we see an artist's hand gets a story. 2 different guys could have directed that same Angel Heart script, and it would have been 2 different movies. And same thing with comics. People all have stories to tell. You have to make it you have to own it and put your language into it, the way you would tell it, and pull yourself out of the story and say, the way I'm telling it is going to be different, and that's what makes a great indie comic, is a very distinctive voice.